Good morning. You are listening to our special Founders Day edition of Wrd, and we are broadcasting live from the Heim Center at the Free Library, 1901 Broad Street. I'm Sara Lomax-Reese. I'm the president and CEO of WURD, and we're really, really excited to welcome folks to join us down here at the Free Library as part of our Founders Day celebration. And as many of you know who've been listening over the last several weeks, this is in celebration of my father, Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD, as the founder of WURD. And so thank you all who are here for coming, and we're looking forward to lots more of you joining us over the course of the day. We'll be here until 7 p.m. This portion, the job fair and the workshops and the panel discussions will conclude at 5, but then we'll have our Lounge Live rooftop mixer from 5 to 7 up on the 4th floor. So you have lots of opportunities to come down and check us out and join the Forward movement and just celebrate the importance of independent Black media. And so right now, you know, it wouldn't be Founders Day without a conversation about the founder, Dr. Lomax. So right now, I am really excited. I talk to these folks all the time, all the time, but it's a whole different experience talking to them in public and through the airwaves. But I get the opportunity to share some reflections and to just talk a little bit about Dr. Lomax, our father, my mother's husband, with my mother, Beverly Lomax.
Hello.
Hello. And my brother Bennett. Hello. And my sister Laura.
Good morning.
So I think my brother Thomas is on his way. And so we are a tribe of 6. There's 6 kids. I am the youngest girl. And I always have to say this. I'm sorry. Somebody asked me yesterday, what's the birth order? And I said, okay, I was the youngest.
But you're supposed to start with the oldest.
I always start with, well, I'm starting with me. I got the mic for now. I was the youngest for 11 and a half years, and then Bennett joined the tribe. So me and Bennett are 11 and a half years apart. And so I was kind of socialized as the youngest, but Bennett is technically and actually the youngest. Laura is the oldest. And then there were like stair steps. So it was Laura, then my brother Thomas, then Charles, then Claire, then me, and then Bennett. So that's kind of the birth order, and you see it play out a little bit in who we are. That birth order stuff is real. But let me start with you, Mom, because you were married to the doctor for 53 years?
55.
55?
Yes.
God, I always get that wrong.
That's all right.
It's a long time.
Yes.
So this whole conversation, this whole day is about the life and legacy of Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD. What would you say is his enduring legacy?
I think it's Wrd, and it's all the people involved in Wrd, and all the good that the hosts and the management do for Wrd. I think that is really his lasting legacy.
Wow. Well, that's I appreciate that. I think you said that. I think you said that last year. So my mother. Everybody talks about my dad as kind of the the champion of Wrd, but this is the one who has been absolutely unwavering in the sustaining and the growth of Wrd. And so I appreciate that, because I hope that we are doing him proud through the work that we're doing at WURD.
Yes, you are, and you continue to do it, and you continue to grow. You grow well, and it's very beautiful to me.
Thank you. So I'm curious, you, Laura, and Bennett, we talk a lot about the legacy of our father, and this is that kind of celebration and acknowledgement. So Laura, what would you say, do you think his kind of like, if there was a singular point that you would identify as his legacy?
A singular point? Can I say something?
Sure, please.
So this morning when I woke up, I was a little reluctant to come because I was feeling sort of emotional about this conversation. But as I was walking in here, I was like, that was Dad saying, you better get those tears out now and show up for your sister. So I would say his legacy was definitely family. But one of the things that I really value was his sense of humor. I mean, he was fiercely funny, sort of irreverent. And can I give a little example? Yeah. So we had the correctional healthcare business, and we would do presentations to grow our business. And we had this big presentation at a state facility. We were all prepared, our medical director, our nurse administrator, we were going in there to wow people. And we walk into this room, this long table with about 20 deputies, wardens, correctional people. And Dad says, wow, you look like a group of correctional people. Like, oh my goodness, it was funny to me. But he's very irreverent. He just, sort of said what was on his mind, but he had a fierce sense of humor. And I think, in terms of, I think that was to give, that's part of resilience. So I think that part of his legacy that he's given to us is resilience.
Bennett?
Good morning. I would say the legacy that my father left behind that really resonates with me is he was very committed to his ideal of black excellence. He supported a lot of organizations that he thought represented black excellence, including WRD and many of the nonprofit organizations that Sara mentioned a little while ago when she was being interviewed about him. But he just had an idea of how black people ought to live and how he wanted to live, how he wanted his family to live in terms of excellence and responsibility. And those are the things that sort of stick with me that I remember about him. He used to always say a lot of maxims and a lot of statements. And one thing he would always say is you got to do what you have to do first and do what you want to do second, and get your work done before you start to play. And that's just always stayed with me, and I know it stayed with everybody he came across because he sort of banged the drum of the things he believed in with anybody he talked to, really.
So let's talk about that kind of black excellence thing, Mom, because he was very exacting about his physical appearance, about his home, he cut his grass meticulously. I mean, so can you talk about a little bit, like, where do you think that came from, that sense of personal pride? He'd see a piece of trash on the ground and he'd pick it up. I mean, he didn't walk past it and just kind of shrug it off. He was really very meticulous.
Walter's family came from King William County, Virginia, and they were farmers. So he brought that sense of rhythm, that sense of doing things in a rhythmic manner with him. And so his parents, when they came to Pennsylvania, they washed on Monday, ironed on Tuesday. They did certain things every day. And so once he started school, he had that pattern or rhythm of studying. When he came home from school, starting from elementary school, he studied. When he went to high school, he came home and studied, so that when finals came, he was ready for finals. He didn't have to cram or anything. He was ready for finals, and he did very well. So one of the things that I remember that he did, every time he got ready to go out, he shined his shoes. He had a chair, and beside that chair was a little shoe shine box that the first one he had, his father had made for him. So he shined, his shoes were always immaculate. And that's one thing I always remember. And of course he was always very clean, very sharp, very impeccably dressed.
So I want to talk about, this is, and this is for you and you, Bennett and Laura. It's 1619. There's been a lot of conversation about the 400th the 400th anniversary or acknowledgement of the 400 years of Black people in the Western Hemisphere in America. And one of the things that is that people came ashore in Virginia, and our roots are in Virginia. And I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit about this kind of radical move that he made when he purchased the plantation where his family had been enslaved. And I wanted to see if you guys could talk a little bit about what the impetus behind that was. And maybe I'll start with you, Mom, if you remember, like, what made him want to do that? And then, Bennett, maybe you can talk a little bit about the other aspects of it.
As with so many things in his life, this grew. It started with a few acres, and then it grew. But I want to tell a little story that it's a family story in his family, that when, of course, his great-grandmother was enslaved at the farm then was known as Aspen Grove. And when the Union soldiers came through the farm after emancipation, the owner of the plantation told them all to get back and hide, and so that the enslaved people, so that they wouldn't be seen. His great-grandmother, Grandma Jenny, who was very outspoken even at that time, she jumped out and she says, "Here we is." So that, I guess that strength, that character, stayed with him.
And what do you know about the purchase of Aspen Grove, Bennett?
So what I know was that he, somebody had willed him and a bunch of other family members some property down in King William County at this farm, right next to this farm where his great-grandmother, Virginia, had been enslaved. He was able to buy out the other family members, and then he met this guy who owned this plantation, the plantation in question called Aspen Grove, and the guy said, Walter, you should try and buy this whole thing. And he ended up buying the plantation. He met the last member of the family that had the plantation. He wanted him to have it because there was a family connection. And he just started buying up the land next to it. He had a thing about, if you buy everything next to you, eventually you'll have everything. And so he started buying up that plantation, more land next to it, a subsequent plantation, and now they, I forget what year it was, but my mother and my father renamed the farm Jubilee Farm, and it's a cobbled together set of plantations down in King William.
And how much land is it?
It's about 785 acres now.
So to me, that's like a great kind of full circle kind of story, especially in 1619 when, we are kind of focused on our history in that particular area and in America, and reclaiming some of this, the narrative around our kind of American story. And so I feel like that story says so much about who Dad was, because he loved real estate. He loved real estate, and he was very, he had an incredible sense for it, and was able to buy low and sell high. And so that was definitely part of his success story. So Laura, as the oldest, you kind of had, you have a different relationship. The oldest, I think, always has a different relationship with the family unit and the parents. But you ran one of the biggest units of business, the correctional healthcare unit. Talk a little bit about what it was like to work for your father? I know it was
Sure about that?
or just whatever
That was-
whatever reflections you want to share.
So of course, like you said, every one of us have it's really interesting. We all have a different perspective on Dad. Because when I think about him, I think of all the time I spent with him as a little one. You know, going to his, going on house calls, going to, even when he was in medical school, I remember going to lectures with him. So we all have a different perspective. Working with him, you know, of course, hindsight, it was amazing because I got the opportunity to really grow a business. I had a lot of latitude. I was working directly with him. So it was amazing to almost have like a living lab to learn and to really grow the organization with a lot of support. I remember, it was a correctional health care. Our first proposal, I believe we did it on a typewriter. And we drove it down to the city of Philadelphia. I believe it was the coroner's office where we had to deliver it. And we got there like just in time. And it was a great celebration for us. It was really, over the years, so in high school, I worked at South Philadelphia Medical Center. And we would drive in every day, drive back every evening. And we spent a lot of time together. And it was really great to be able to sort of soak up and have that time with Dad.
So what would you say are like kind of, what were some of his core business philosophies? And I'll ask you that.
Well,
everybody
you
that.
know what? As a matter of fact, when Dad passed, Bennett and I did a whole list of like, we called them Dadisms. And one of them was, when I'm up, you're up. So so he was very, like Mom was saying, very methodical. He wanted everybody to stay busy. It was not uncommon for me, and maybe for you, Bennett, who also worked with Dad, to get a call like first thing in the morning, like, what's up? What's happening? What are you doing today? What's what's going on with the business? So does that sort of answer?
No, I definitely think that was the way that we were socialized. Like, so we grew up in Bucks County, which is about an hour from Center City. And when Dad would pull up, if you were sitting around like watching TV, oh no, you got up and you like picked up a broom or a rag or something. You would not be caught dead chilling. If he was working, you were working. Or even if he wasn't working, you better look busy. And
that's true.
And I think that, you might have had, it's funny because like I said, Bennett's much younger than all of us. And so our father, he was at a different stage in his life when you were, so Bennett, he would come home and Bennett would come downstairs and sit down and have dinner with him and chat and talk. And I would look at that, I'd be like, what? That is like not even a possibility.
First of all, I was very civilized. And
You're very what? Civilized?
Civilized.
Well,
we had a very good relationship.
You did, and the other thing is, we were like a mob.
Yeah, you guys were out
there
of
were
control.
5 of us, and we were always fighting. We were always arguing. I get the front. I get the TV. I get the.
Well,
I mean,
I always
Laura
got
was
what I
the law.
wanted, just saying.
Laura was the law, but the rest of us, weren't we always arguing?
Who
You
gets
don't
the
remember.
front- who
I
gets the-
remember.
Who gets the
Because
window?
I think I tuned it out.
Yeah,
Wait, Sarah.
she was great. She's a great tuner-outer.
Sarah, the other
to
thing that Dad would
to
always say was
survive.
that he didn't have confidence in his children, so he had his own grandchild.
Right, that was
That's
Bennett. Right, that was his joke.
Yeah,
That
that
was-
was David Huggins said that.
Oh, really? But anyway, you had a very different kind of relationship because, you were so much younger. And what's deep is, again, Bennett is much younger, but when it was time to kind of decide who would kind of lead the organization, my father picked Bennett. And we were all like, okay. There was no like, what? That little scrub? No. We were all like, okay, yeah, we get it, because Bennett has like a really level, smart approach to things. So talk a little bit about kind of your leadership and how it was
Can I interject
influenced.
something
Please.
there, because I think everyone respected that everyone's job was very important, and it wasn't. I didn't consider it hierarchical. He had a job to do, Bennett, and you and Laura, everybody had it, but it wasn't that he was the boss, and he didn't come at it that way, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's true.
Thank you, Mother.
That's true. I mean, and so I think that's a really important part about like the family business dynamic And because there are a lot of families who really implode when kind of the leader transitions or leaves. And Dad was definitely a iron-fisted leader. The buck stopped with him. He would solicit everybody's opinion, but he made he always made the final decision. But when he passed, that was a real test for us as a family to figure out how we do decision making, how we do that. So talk a little bit about the family business dynamic, since you are kind of technically the CEO.
That's an interesting dynamic. I think, we went through a lot of work with family business consultants when we made the transition, the leadership transition, which fortunately we did while he was alive. We started doing that, I think, around 2004, 2005. And so, I was able to take on a greater level of responsibility with his, guardrails up, with him being very much actively involved. My relationship with him was really extraordinary. I was so fortunate to have spent an enormous amount of time with him, and he became like my best friend, really, both personally, but also like my work wife, too. I mean, I talked to him 10 or 20 times a day for years about everything from my family, my children, to did I do the thing that he asked me to do this, 20 minutes ago, or why isn't it done yet, or I need to do it again. He was famous for the red marker or the red pen. When you would do a memo, you'd send him a memo saying, hey, here's what's going on, X, Y, Z, and he would mark it up like he was grading it and give it back to you to do it again. And it was great because it was a level of not so much perfection, but just really striving to do your best, because you knew that the big dog was going to grade your papers effectively. So, in terms of our overall family dynamic, I think, I've been blessed with diplomatic skills that he and everybody else recognized. I avoided, just by virtue of my age, having worked with everybody in the previous businesses. And so, when it was time to make a choice, I think everybody agreed on me taking that responsibility at the Lomax companies. But what we've done is we've created a management committee. We've developed a more sort of consensus-driven model for decision-making to get everybody's buy-in and input. We're all partners in a variety of businesses. Different individuals in the partnership have different responsibilities for different aspects of the business, but we all work extremely closely. I think, in a very different way than when he was alive. His style was much more autocratic. I joke that we all came up under a common dictator, which we did, and it was great while we had it, but as we've all gotten older and more responsibility, the business has evolved, and our style of managing the business has evolved to more of a partnership model.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to reintroduce, we are broadcasting live. This is Founders Day. If you're listening on the air, you need to come down to 1901 Vine Street for our Founders Day celebration. We're going to be here until 7 o'clock, and so you can check us out. We are having a kind of a personal conversation with the Lomax family, my mother, Beverly Lomax, my brother, Bennett Lomax, my sister, Laura Lomax, and I'm Sara Lomax-Reese, and we hope that you'll come and join us, and we've got a nice group of folks who are here, and I welcome folks to, if you have any questions, thoughts, reflections, you can certainly chime in and participate. One of the things that we have today is we have a little corner over there. You won't be able to see where I'm pointing if you're listening on the radio, but there's a little mobile unit over there, and we have an area where you can write your reflections of Dr. Lomax. And so, if over the course of the day, if you want to write something, we're trying to put together a book about my father. So we would love to get as much input as possible. And then later on today, from 3 to 5 p.m., Scribe Video Center is going to be here, and they're going to be doing kind of audio and video reflections over in that area over there. So lots of opportunities to capture thoughts, memories, reflections of Dr. Lomax. And so, Mom, one of the things that we haven't talked about much is his life as a doctor. You know, that was his first and primary career, and it seemed to me like that was somewhat of a heavy burden because he took care of so many people, both formally and informally, and it seemed like a lot of he was like the doctor to all of his family, like whether it was his kids, whether it was his siblings or other people. Can you talk a little bit about his how he felt about being a doctor?
He practiced, in my opinion, he practiced the art of medicine, and I was really, really upset when he decided to stop practicing and to go into business. His patients loved him. He wasn't a complainer, and he didn't bring any problems or any dissatisfactions home about his practice of medicine. If anything, he would joke and laugh and talk about his practice. I guess, what did you once said, our lives were traditionally separated. I took care of the home. He took care of his practice of medicine. So I tried to make his home as welcoming and as peaceful as possible. And he was able to come home and relax and enjoy his home. Did that answer you? No.
That's good. Laura, do you have any thoughts about him as a doctor?
I never felt like he felt it was a burden at all. I never felt that, even when he was early on going and doing house calls. You know, and I remember it was at a time when children could stay in the car by themselves. So I remember going to different places in South Philly, waiting in the car, and the patients were just, they loved him. The other thing that I think was really impressive and unique is that Dad really, his whole thing was, and this is something that I know that I continue, access. He wanted people in South Philly, Germantown, et cetera, to have access to quality services. So he was really focused on creating these multi-specialty centers, bringing services to the community. And he, again, the real estate thing, he loved creating these beautiful facilities, staffing them with like the top physicians and PAs, having contracts and relationships with the best hospitals, best doctors. So his vision was as a practitioner, but he also, as like we all grow, he grew into this, and that's probably his segue to being an entrepreneur, but he really wanted, again, to create access and give people seeing doctors that looked like them, that really cared for them, have lab, OBGYN, pediatrics, all in one location, pharmacy, lab, so people could come and have access to quality services, and that was really his motivation. So, and he was a fantastic doctor. He wore his lab coat. He went to South Philly every day, except Wednesdays, I think he had off. So I mean, I remember that was like his heyday, really. Although, Mom, you said
we come back to that rhythm again, because he did rounds. I think that they don't do rounds much anymore. Mm-mm. And so he was faithful about doing his rounds, seeing his patients all the time, and talking to his patients.
That was one of the things that I thought was so unique about him and you, is he would invite anyone and everyone to sit and talk with them. So he did believe in access, and so it didn't matter what walk of life you were in, he invited people in and was genuinely curious and interested about what people's experiences were and what they had to say. And I think that's one of the reasons why he really liked Wrd, too, is because it was this space of where people were talking with each other, and all walks of life, all different kinds of people are able to speak and be heard. Laura?
I just wanted to add, I think one of the reasons that he maybe became a physician, he talked about doing good and doing well, but I think as like maybe one of the first graduates of college in his family, like anyone else, he was always available to his family in terms of health care, in terms of, I know he was my doctor, my kid's doctor, and when he was gone, I was just like humming, and I figured go to a real, so anyway, I just wanted to add that point.
So,
Yeah,
Ben,
and
yeah,
to
go
this
ahead.
and to this day, family members say, "Oh, if only Bubby was around," because he would know what to do with what's going on in my life.
Yeah, he was a brilliant he was just a brilliant man, period. And his nickname was Bubby, for those of you who just heard my mom say Bubby. Where did that come from?
As I heard, his sister Gloria, couldn't say brother, and she called him Bubby, and so
And it stuck.
And it stuck.
It stuck.
It
So
stuck forever.
yeah, Bennett, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about his philosophy on wealth creation, because
He believed in it.
okay,
Strongly.
give me a little more than that.
His philosophy was primarily anchored in stay away from debt. He believed very strongly the first thing you do when you can is pay off your home and own your home. He used to tell me, how do you call something yours if you have to pay for it every month? And so he was, he had mortgages, and he had been in debt different times in his career, and whenever he got into debt, his only thought and motivation was how to get rid of it and pay it off. And he believed, and he used to talk about, particularly with respect to black people, how black people went from the cotton fields to the professions without going through business and without really understanding the concept of gross and net. And he talked about what you make is one thing, what you save and what you keep is what really matters. What you spend is how you define what you're going to keep. He was very frugal. Some might say cheap, but he was really focused on not wasting money, not wasting resources, not spending money, always having surplus. It didn't matter what you make, it mattered what you spent. And don't be in debt as much as you're capable of. That was his sort of basic philosophy. He was a very fundamental person and dealt in things from a basic standpoint as opposed to an esoteric or an academic or an intellectual standpoint. Extremely smart and intellectual, but he always had a view of, if it's not simple or simple to understand or simple to explain, the fundamentals and the core of a business issue, he would sort of cut to it with sort of old school country maxims that he brought from his father and his mother. That was sort of his philosophy of doing things, and it worked very well for him.
And I remember like when I guess it was, I don't know, before the 2008 crash, when all of those like really funky financial instruments like reverse mortgages and all of that stuff were like all the rage. Dad was like, nah, don't mess with that stuff.
Yeah, he was a famous, I don't want to say a contrarian, because he wasn't just a contrarian for contrarian's sake, but he had a deep suspicion of anything, of basically everything, and no, really, and he would be very skeptical of get rich quick or silver bullets, things that will allow you to skip steps to become successful. He just didn't believe in it. So when there were financial products or things that smelled fishy to him or that he just didn't understand, he never bought into it. He was never a trend follower. He used to tell me constantly, if people go outside the door, you walking out of a building, and everybody goes left, most of the people walking are just following the person in front of them. You need to know whether you're going left or right based on whether you think it's the right place to go. And you got to follow what you think is right and not just follow the person you're walking behind.
Exactly.
Amen. Laura, you want to say something?
I wanted to add that so he had friends, some very close friends for a long time. One of his friends, Mr. Carr, J.B. Carr, who was a mechanic on Lancaster Avenue, great friend. I think he got a lot of those, like just basic things. But he said his friend and him, they used to have a competition to see who could spend the least amount of money, which I thought was really interesting. They would, on the weekends, they would say, well, how much did you spend? That was one thing. The other thing is we went to a Americhoice celebration, 30-year anniversary, and the head of the organization...
Say what Americhoice is.
Americhoice was an outgrowth in the 90s, early 90s. Tony Welters, who was an attorney and a businessman from New York, got together with my father as a physician, and they created a health insuring organization called Americhoice. At that point, he actually had to sell his practice because he couldn't be an insurer and a provider. But we had a 30-year celebration in Washington, D.C. Was that a good enough explanation? Yeah. And Tony Welcher said one of the things that he learned about, and Tony was a genius. He's younger than my dad, but he said he learned that my dad, he never made a decision quickly, right? That's right. He would, I've seen him in negotiations wait years, Winsong. I mean, he is not a person that's going to react. He's not going to be forced into a decision, and he said he never made a decision quickly, in the moment.
No, he always thought about it. Mm-hmm. He always wanted to go cut grass and think about it. He had, my mother spoke of it in terms of a rhythm, in terms of his process and how he sort of lived his life, but he was really he was a disciplined person, and you don't go from A to C. You always touch B first. I mean, he never skipped steps on anything from brushing his teeth to, a major merger and acquisition.
I see my brother Thomas has slipped in. Thomas, do you want to come? You want to come join us? You want to say anything? So Thomas is the oldest son. His name is Walter Thomas Lomax, and you came all this way. I want you to have an opportunity to weigh in. We've just been, we've been talking about Dad, and anything you wanna say about. And we all have worked very closely with our father. He's been my only employer in my entire.
I think Thomas
life.
Was the first.
Thomas,
you were the first. Second.
You were the first one to work
I was
for
the
Dad.
first one.
He was the first.
Okay,
Yeah.
how so?
How so?
Yeah.
Well, actually, as a youngster, I was not the best student. I'll say that. And I took a hiatus from college. And during that hiatus, I got employed with a tanning place where you tan and cure animal hides. Well, I was out there one day in the dead of winter in sort of a pole barn with the wind whipping through, my feet cold, and I said, this is not me. So at that point, I went home and I sat with my father. I said, Dad, look, can I come work for you? I promise I'll do good. He said, okay. Start with cleaning the bathrooms.
Yes.
I said,
exactly.
Okay, that's better than standing in a pole barn in the dead of winter, right? So at least I'll be indoors. So basically, I took that opportunity and proved myself by cleaning the bathrooms, cleaning the medical centers, and working the front desk, and then doing everything. Fast forward to being CFO today. So I will say he did not have favorites, although I'd like to believe I was his favorite, but
I think I was.
It just-
No, I don't think I was.
I think
I know I was.
everybody in this row thinks they were, right? But that's just the way he made you feel. He always made you feel, most of the time, made you feel good about yourself. But if you got out of line, he would let you know that you're not so good, right? But no, he was just a great role model, and I feel very, very, very fortunate to have had him as basically a living role model for the first 50 some odd years of my life.
Thomas, what would you say? We were talking about his like wealth creation kind of philosophies or strategies. Would you give any that you can think of? Because that was really, I think that Bennett described it very beautifully, that he was like a grinder. He was like a very methodical, it wasn't anything fancy, it wasn't anything, but what would you say in terms of like?
For all you basketball fans out there, he was basically about chest passes. Don't go behind your back, don't go between your legs, dribble and chest pass. It was all about the fundamentals and the basics. And that got him, he did well by just applying the fundamentals of business.
So at this point, I want to see if anybody wants to say anything in the audience, if anybody has any questions, any comments, anything that you want to, is this a question from the audience, or is this your question? Okay, so this is the question that I was just given. What can young people do to uphold Dr. Lomax's legacy? Anybody? I would say do well in school.
Yeah,
I would say
that also. I would say start. If you're in elementary school, start practicing in elementary school. Do your homework. Pay attention to your teachers. Read. Listen. Take time and listen to yourself. And that self is spelled capital SELF. Listen to yourself. There are a lot of distractions out here.
amen to that.
One thing I would advise the youngsters is understand that there are no shortcuts. Now, that being said, in this day and age, see, back in the day, we couldn't just pick up a phone and do whatever we wanted at the drop of a hat, all right? If we wanted to call somebody, we either had to do one of two things. Wait till we got home to a landline and call them, or find a payphone. I know y'all don't know what that is, but find a payphone somewhere out there on the corner.
I think the people in here know.
Well, I see some youngsters that may not. Find a payphone and make the call. Now, so all I can say is understand there are no shortcuts, and as fast as you may want to get things done, take your time and do them right and do them thoroughly.
All right, we got a question.
Can I add something?
Yeah, we got a question out here, but go ahead, Laura.
To young people, one of the things, I think he was very savvy when it comes to finance, but he was also, you said he was very practical and tight, but he was very generous. Oh, yeah. And so the idea of philanthropy, the idea of giving, the idea of helping your friends, he was an incredibly generous person. So I think don't forget, while you're being mindful of money, it literally is not everything. I think he valued this family, and he did love him some Wrd.
He did.
But don't be just money conscious all the time.
Yeah. Yes. Question? Yes.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
What are the hundreds of acres in Virginia being used for?
Good question. What are the hundreds of acres in Virginia being used for?
It's a home.
The original home that was built in 1732 is still there. He had the home, he renovated and built an addition onto that home. He's re-landscaped the whole property. It's really gorgeous. But we have a tenant farmer that leases part of the land to grow soybeans, corn, and other crops, wheat, hay. And then we do some timber farming down there as well. But nothing, major, just sort of small farming. Yeah.
Our dream is to make that an organic farm, to grow good, pure food for people.
Amen.
Yes, so my mother's like an avid gardener and has been that our whole life. And she is very passionate about the food and food sovereignty and all of those things. So, yes, we have a question over here. Yes.
Yes, I like to say that we ask our young people to have a little more respect and take time, and we got to understand when we go into a job, we don't lay down in the bed because the job is not coming to us. I'm talking from a grandmother that's 7, 8 years old and still working. This Monday, I've been on my job 30 years. It's a nursing home job. But we're going to understand that, and I was just saying, anybody here that don't have patience, we don't go to a nursing home. We don't go to a hospital. Because we got to understand that we there to help and understand people. You might get knocked down and kicked, but you still stay on the line. And we just got to listen, because ain't no job coming in us bed. And when the man tell you to be there, just be there on time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Was there a question over here? Oh, we've got a question over here. Thank you, Ashley. Hey, David.
So how did this accomplished physician and wonderful businessman and real estate magnate, how did he get involved in the unlucrative business of radio? And would you talk more about just Wrd and what it meant to him and why?
I think he asked himself that many times.
Yeah, he wasn't, I said this a little bit earlier, he wasn't a media person. He's a doctor and a philanthropist and a real estate business person. I think he loved the idea of being able to help people on a mass scale. You know, he was approached by Cody Anderson to buy Wrd, and I think initially he was like, no, that doesn't make any sense. But what Cody said is, look, a lot of people are going to come to you for money. You can't give everybody money, but you can give everybody a voice. And so that really resonated. My dad was like a Renaissance man. He really loved his community. He loved his people. And so that singular concept just made sense to him. And I think that, and he was I think that as methodical as he was also an emotional decision maker. So I think that
he believed, I mean, because, when he made the decision to buy Wrd, and to go down the road of being in the media, there was a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of discussion about the prudence of going in that direction. But he was committed to this notion of independent black media, and it was a passion and a personal interest of his. When he was involved with AmeriChoice, the media, he had been a darling in Philadelphia in the community as this doctor who had medical centers around the city. But when he got involved with AmeriChoice, and it was a really a large opportunity that the really big national players wanted, some of the media were beating him up. And he thought that there wasn't necessarily a voice for the black community and for black people as a businessman, and he wanted to have his own voice and his own outlet.
And did you want to say something, Laura?
I just wanted to add that the other thing, I think he really believed in speaking truth to power. And I think the idea that the radio station gave him that vehicle over which he had control, and I think that was a critical thing that he really felt. I think part of the reason I think that he became successful is so that he could have that sort of that agency to be able to say what he wanted, when he wanted. He didn't have to kowtow to anybody. And so he bought the radio station to be able to do that, I think.
I think he did that before Wrd, though. He did.
Oh, he did.
He said
Oh,
what
he
he wanted
did.
when he wanted.
Mm-hmm. He did.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is really unique about Dad, particularly in this era, is he did not really code switch. He was who he was in every place that he was, whether he was out on the main line or on the corner in South Philly or with his boys, or he was consistently who he was, and just like was very grounded in who he was as a man and as a person. But I think that to get to another part of your question, David, and I've thought about this a lot, having been exploring issues around media and sustainability and local media and the crisis that we're currently in terms of how do we protect not just black media, but local media in general is under assault. And so, and to be clear, Wrd is like a purple unicorn. Wrd is absolutely unusual in the country to have a black-owned talk radio station in a major market that is all day long talking about the issues that are most relevant to our community. And the reason that we have endured for 16 years, I think two major reasons, and I've been thinking about this a lot. One, the no debt thing, the thing that Bennett talked about. Wrd was purchased outright, and so we don't have debt service. If we had debt service, that would be a whole different, ball game. And two, the people sitting up here, we have an incredibly talented family. Claire, who's not here, is our general counsel. She's the one right next to me. Thomas is our CFO. Bennett is the CEO and does all the business development stuff. My brother Charles, who will be here at 12 for the Equitable Development panel, he's a real estate developer, and so he's doing development to help us move into a new office space. And Laura has reinvented herself as a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. And so we have like all this expertise that we don't have to write checks for Wrd. Which if we had to, and we do have to get outside counsel, we do have to get outside services periodically, but there's a lot of internal expertise that we can tap that's a part of our family, and that is a real difference maker and a real gift. And so from a business standpoint, that's a differentiator. But just philosophically, I think it's really about perpetuating and stabilizing and growing this outlet that gives us agency as a people at a time that is absolutely critical. This is a really crazy time in the country around race and justice. So I know there's another question.
Can I add something, Sarah?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that we all sort of embody dad and mom, but Sarah leading this initiative, let's not overlook that, because you are like fierce. Your team out here are fierce, and the listeners, my goodness, what a supportive, loyal audience. But I mean, thank you for the work that you're doing.
And
Sarah.
I must say, she's been fierce for a long time.
Little Miss Sarah. Little Miss
guys.
Hello.
Ooh, thank you.
All right.
I like you.
Hi. I'd just like to speak to the human side on all of this, not the business side. The legacy lives on with the Lomax family, and that I had an opportunity to meet him down at Sugar House. And the way that you talked about your dad and how he was truly a man of grace, and that regardless of your status in life, whether you were somebody who was just a regular everyday person that supports Wrd, or whatever your position is, I can honestly say that this is a family. The Lomax family makes you feel that you are part of the family. And I think that's one of the greatest testimonies, that your dad lives on. The way that you described him, you are carrying the torch, Sarah, and your family members throughout this whole Wrd program. And you can't, for a lot of us, you are our family. And when we see you and you embrace us and we call in and we support, we really do feel that we're part of the Lomax family. And that's one of the greatest testimonies to, you can be successful in business, but when you're successful and you have grace and mercy as a person, that's really what lives on as your legacy. And I think your dad would be smiling right now if he was looking down on every last one of you, because you're doing a great job. And your staff here at Wrd, all these young people, they put their heart into all of it. And that's why we love you and we support you like we do. And that's from the heart. I think I'm speaking for a lot of people in this room.
Thank you.
We love you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have time for like two more questions because Dr. Helana Warren is about to start in a few minutes, but go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, this has been an amazing event, and thank you, Sarah, for inviting the Economy League to be part of this today. I see a job fair out there, and I wanted to ask you about the connection between WURD and economic development. I know that's something you are moving towards. I know the whole family has been about that, but can you speak specifically about your thoughts about how Wrd is playing a role in economic development in the community?
Sure, sure. So, you know, my dad was a doctor, and he was very passionate about economic development. So Founders Day always has kind of that dual track around wellness and entrepreneurship and economic development. And so today, we are unveiling kind of a new initiative that we are launching called Livelihood, which is all about connecting, using Wrd's platforms to connect our community with jobs, work readiness, information, and entrepreneurship opportunities. So the job fair that's happening out in the lobby is a part of that initiative. We're going to have workshops on resume building, an expungement clinic, conversations about you know, all kinds of ways to empower yourself around work. And we recognize that Philly has a large unemployment rate, particularly in the Black community. And so we feel like it's our responsibility as this connector, as this media platform that talks with the Black community all the time, to use these platforms, whether it's events like this or on air or electronic, social media, digital, to try and use those platforms to create opportunities to connect our people with this information and resources. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about work and jobs and entrepreneurship on our airwaves, through our events. We're trying to layer on kind of a job fair thing to all of our events, because this issue is ongoing, it's deep, and we need to play our part, and we are playing our part to make that connection. Go ahead, Bennett.
I don't want to step on that point, but I just want to say something. Dad would be so proud of what you've done with Wrd to make this work, and this is, and Thomas knows what I'm talking about. This has not been an easy journey. It's been very, very difficult as we've learned the media business, and as you've really grown and made this thing successful. And Dad would just be so tickled right now if he could be here. No, seriously, he'd be so tickled if he could see what you're doing with Wrd, with this thing that he loved, that he frankly didn't figure out how to make work when he was doing it, that you figured out how to make work. And so, I'm proud, and I just want to, people who listen to the station, there's so much passion for this station, but they don't have any idea, nobody has any clue how difficult and how hard it is to do this. And you do it every day, and you do it well. And I just want to say, on behalf of the Bubster, who's looking down from above, and on behalf of the audience and everybody else, well done, kiddo.
Mr. Sarah.
So I think there are a couple more questions. I think we probably have time for one more question. Yeah, thank you, Bennett.
Yeah.
Thank you, finally. I just wanted to say that I grew up in South Philadelphia, right around the corner from your father's office. And at first we didn't really believe he was a doctor because we saw so few African American doctors in our community. So we found out he was a real doctor. And what I want to say is that I did not know until years past that he was such an accomplished person. I think it was when Wrd started that I found out so many other things your father was. A shrewd businessman, a great philanthropist, and we always knew that he cared about community because he was always there for us. He was patient with the kids and patient with their parents, and we knew his name was Bubby. And later years, when I became involved with political people, we came to your home and visited. For some reason. We were probably begging for something. And he was the same gentleman, but his spirit will live forever because he was such a dynamic individual that you should be proud that he was your father, and I'm sure he's proud that you are his.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more, because Helana is running a little late, but yes, One more question.
Well, this is, it's not actually a question, but it's an applaud for the family and for WRD. There's 3 pillars in society: political, societal, and economic. And Wrd is working diligent in all 3 of those pillars. And in order for the black community to truly be lifted up, we have to focus on the economics components of our communities. And it's about jobs and what your mom said, education.
Absolutely.
I applaud you.
Thank you, Dr. Blake.
Thanks.
So, yes, so I want to thank my people, my family, for coming down and participating. So I'm kind of like the mouthpiece a lot of times. These guys, they generally don't like to do this. And so I'm really grateful that everybody showed up. And I know Claire's listening. Charles is there. Wave, Charles. That's my brother Charles. And he's going to be on the panel at 12 about gentrification. Do you want to say anything, Charles? No. Charles is a man of few words. But he's going to have his opportunity at 12 o'clock. We're having a panel called Equitable Development, which is really looking at the other side of gentrification. So looking forward to that. Does anybody want to say a final thought before we close out?
I
Laura?
just wanted to add something, sort of building on what the sister in the hat over there said, and what the gentleman just now said. Those pillars, the other pillar that I think is really important for our people is the spiritual pillar. And my mother, the other half of my father, is that part of him. So I think let's not forget that piece, which is our sweet spot, really. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bennett, do you want to say anything final?
No, I would, I guess, yeah, I do want to say one last thing. I was talking to my brother Charles the other day. Charles and I are neighbors where we work together. We talk a lot. And we were talking about somebody we knew, and we said, the best thing they have going for them is that they're successful. That's the best part about this individual. And we said, the thing about Dad that was really special is his money and his success was not the best thing he had going for him by a long stretch. He had a good spirit, and he made the world better. He had a friend who used to say there's 2 types of people in the world, miners and farmers. Miners take stuff out. Farmers constantly replenish and put stuff back. And Dr. Lomax, Dad, Bubby, he was a real farmer.
Amen. I'm going to let you have the last word, Beverly. Thomas?
No, just thank everybody for coming out today, and understand that my father's spirit lives on.
Amen. Yes. And before you give your last, I think that Bev, my mom, is like the quiet. She's a quiet storm for sure. She seems really like laid back, but man, she's steely. She is.
Yes.
She is.
Oh, yes,
Don't mess with Bev, and don't mess with her kids. And so my mother has been. She's like, she really is the spiritual force of WURD. She has been unwavering from the very beginning, and she has been my rock through this process. So I just really appreciate you, Bevy. So
Thank you. I wish I could add to that, but thank you very much. Yeah, I have to tape that so that I can play it for myself. But thank you all very much. That's all I can say is thank you.
yes, and I want to thank all of you who are here. I want to thank the people who are listening in the audience. We are broadcasting live. This is Founders Day at the Central Branch of the Free Library at 1901 Vine Street. We are in the Heim Center, this beautiful, beautiful space. We have a job fair going on, the Livelihood Job Fair. We've got workshops that are coming up. We've got yoga. We've got panels. We've got all kinds of resources, and we've got a discounted membership today for our Wrd folks. So please come down if you're not here. Thank you to all of you who are here. And next up is Helana Warren, who is our host of Daybreak, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. And so she is amazing. She is going to be taking the mic from me. And again, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you stick around.